Kia ora comrades, this is Ani White for Where's My Jetpack, bringing you recommendations of trash to watch during this period of physical distancing and lockdown. So, I'm a bit of a casual when it comes to gaming. I was always a bit alienated by the culture, even before the Gamergate wave. But I've been getting a bit more into it recently, and Derek last week recommended Life is Strange, and I absolutely agree. It's a very emotionally effective portrayal of basically characters trying to negotiate ethics and relationships. It uses the ability to make choices to kind of explore these things. So that's something which really no other medium can do other than games. You know, you can make choices and they affect the story. So one of the main concepts of the game is this action will have consequences. So I recommend those games, Life is Strange, and also they don't really require any skill. So there's no combat or anything. There are some puzzles which you can look up on YouTube, but that's about it. So for a casual like me, they are easy. And YouTube, as I mentioned, YouTube is a bit of a hive of scum and villainy, but there is a lot of gaming commentary and let's plays and streams on there, and not all of it is kind of outright. So you have, for example, Eurogamer, which is a very popular website, but the YouTube channel on the scale of GamerTube is quite small. It's like less than 1%, for example, of PewDiePie's following, and PewDiePie sucks. But Eurogamer is a bit more kind of liberal and also very entertaining and funny gaming commentary. So recently they've been doing the Final Fantasy VII game, the original, which personally I never played the Final Fantasy games. I watched the very bad movie, but I knew people who were very into Final Fantasy, so it's kind of interesting for me to catch up on this 20-year-old game, which is about to be remade. So it's kind of a background for the remake as well. And also on Eurogamer, they've been doing a Dungeons and Dragons game, the Break Quest Club, which Johnny Chiodini, who's one of my absolute favorites, is the dungeon master, and they're very comedic D&D games. And the first thing that got me onto Eurogamer was their Life is Strange playthrough, so I recommend that as well. And streams are quite good for social isolation as well, or self-isolation, because you have chats, you have live chats during live streams. So there's a bit more of a kind of social element to it. And I mean, if you're already a gamer, you'll know this, but I do recommend Steam, which is basically the website for free, not free. Well, there have been free games recently, like Tomb Raider was 100% off, but it's the website for PC games basically. And also in terms of free stuff, Verso recently has had 100, currently has 100% off the book Feminism for the 99%, which is a very short manifesto for basically contemporary socialist feminism. So that's very much worth a read. So onto movies and TV shows. You probably already know this, but just in case, a lot of streaming websites have 30-day free trials, and of course you can sign up and then dump it after 30 days. Don't tell Amazon, but I've been doing that to watch Picard, the new Star Trek series, which kind of portrays the breakdown of the Trek ethos or of the Federation, but like similar to something like Firefly you still have a kind of dealing with ethics, but it's more ethics that are led by individuals rather than institutions. So in that sense, it's a bit of a departure from classic Trek. Whereas something like Discovery is in the early days of the Federation, and even though it's kind of tested by wartime conditions, there's a bit more of a sense of institutional ethics, especially in the second series. So yeah, Discovery and Picard, I think both great series, but a bit of a contrast in terms of how they portray kind of ethics. And what else? I've got a couple of articles coming up in Aurealis, which is a sci-fi journal. One comparing 90s X-Files with the reboot and kind of looking at them in political context. So in the context of the Clinton era and the Trump era. So maybe you'll enjoy that if you're an X-Files fan. If you're not an X-Files fan, maybe binge it. It's kind of an early example of basically semi-serialized storytelling, a mix of episodic and serialized storytelling. Does it very badly, the serialization, but it's still lots of fun. Obviously, you're aware of that. It's enormously popular, but if you haven't watched it, it is lots of fun. And another article I'll be doing for Aurealis is a comparison of the short story Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang with the famous movie adapted from it, Arrival, which both kind of deal with the question of communication with alien intelligence, which a lot of sci-fi kind of sidesteps. So you often have universal translators, so they don't have to worry about that. Whereas this is entirely about the question of translation of alien languages, which was a question that Carl Sagan used to be very interested in, the science popularizer Carl Sagan. So the movie Contact, which is adapted from his book Contact, deals with that question of communication with alien intelligence, and Arrival kind of echoes that. But I'll be doing an article comparing Arrival with the short story it's adapted from, and kind of saying that the movie amps up the military element and related to that kind of a pacifist element, whereas the short story is mainly, it's more small scale and it's mainly about grief. And so anyway, they're both fantastic, and you can find the short story free again online. If you search for it on Google, and you can find a free PDF of it. That Story of Your Life again. And Arrival is in the US. It's on Netflix, but yeah, in the US it's on Netflix. But in Australia, I believe it's on SBS Australia, which is actually free of charge. So I do recommend signing up for SBS Australia. If you're in New Zealand, I recommend TVNZ On Demand, which is also free. And yeah, otherwise I've been binging a few sitcoms for some kind of lighter watching. So, The Good Place on Netflix, which is kind of deals with ethics, and it's a very funny kind of character-based comedy, and also, I mean, unusually serialized for a sitcom, but very, very funny. And obviously, a lot of people know Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well, which is brilliant and hilarious. And in terms of The Good Place, there were some interesting parallels between the finale of that show and the finale of BoJack Horseman, another brilliant Netflix comedy. And I won't spoil what those parallels were, but they were very interesting in terms of kind of ethics and mortality. So that's a good one. And another sitcom I've been re-binging, slightly older one, is Community, which is a very sort of pop culture referential and also very diverse sitcom, and is hilarious. And it was kind of what made Dan Harmon, who now is known for Rick and Morty, which I have mixed feelings about. But Community is much less mixed feelings about. It's a great show. But yeah, and that was also where Donald Glover kind of got a start with who is now known as Childish Gambino, with the very popular "This Is America" track, obviously. But yeah, so Community is a good one. And in terms of Donald Glover or Childish Gambino, I'm a big fan of the album Because the Internet he made, which kind of has a collagey kind of element to it, kind of mixing together a lot of different kind of styles of production. It's actually kind of in production terms in a similar vein to what we try to do with the podcast, with the kind of collage and melange of different elements. Hopefully, our production gets a bit better this year, though. We have an editor now to even out the levels. We've had some complaints about levels, so if that's been an issue, we're doing better this year. We already are paying someone to sort out the levels. So yeah. And our next episode is on drugs, simply called Drugs, which will be released on 420 Day. And related to that, we're recommending Brass Eye, a brilliant 90s current affairs satire by Chris Morris, and in particular the drugs episode, which had, for example, he manufactured a moral panic. He made up a fictional drug and got celebrities to sign on to a campaign against it, and even managed to get a politician to raise a fictional drug in Parliament. So it just showed how easy it is to generate moral panics. And also, relevantly in this place and time, how people in power actually often, sadly, don't know what they're doing. It's very easy to get into a conspiracy theorist mindset that everything is a scheme and the people in power are plotting, but actually a lot of the time they have no idea what they're doing. There's a lot of incompetence actually in the ruling class, and Brass Eye kind of captures that quite well, that sheer incompetence and confusion. And the earlier show he did, The Day to Day, is also very funny as a news satire. And he also made Four Lions, the terrorism satire, and more recently, Chris Morris made The Day Shall Come, which came out last year. And that was a satire on the FBI kind of entrapping terrorists, but also generating terrorist plots. So by entrapping people, they actually kind of manufacture terrorist plots in order to justify their own existence. So he kind of captures that, and it's basically a farce. Like, the style of comedy is farce, which you don't see a lot today, and it was very funny. So yeah, The Day Shall Come, I highly recommend, and anything by Chris Morris. His kind of breakthrough again in the 90s was Jam, which is a very surreal comedy and a bit nightmarish. So it kind of depends on what you can kind of tolerate in terms of comedy. But if you can tolerate kind of nightmarish, surreal sketch comedy, because it's sketch comedy as well, I recommend Jam. Otherwise, we're going into lockdown, obviously, here in Victoria and back in my home country of New Zealand. So, if you're going under lockdown, or even if you aren't, stay home, wash your hands, be nice to each other, fight for paid leave, fight for comprehensive testing to the best of your abilities. We don't all have a lot of energy, but support comprehensive testing, public health care, paid leave, but also social distancing, because actually, if we don't do that, it will continue to rise exponentially. It is a real problem. So take it seriously. Good night and good luck. And watch Trash as well. I recommend that during this time of terror.